Everyone, and welcome to our teaching and learning video for the week, which is part of our practice series, and we're having a look at the idea of say it first today. If we actually consider what happens in our classrooms as we're actually delivering new content for the first time, then what's going to happen is, as those students are then going to start to do that deliberate practice of the new material, what we'll see is, as they give their response, it's likely to be a little bit hesitant, maybe a bit tentative, they're not 100% sure, so their answers might be a little bit stuttery. Now, what we're going to be doing in order to get that kind of response, typically, is using things like whole class questioning or discussions as a group. Maybe we're going down the route of paired conversations that you're able just to walk around and listen in on. But what we will notice is they're not going to be massively confident in discussing or answering these questions the right way at this early stage. And why would they be? But we've got to make sure that what we do takes them from that very tentative, hesitant first steps to a much more confident, clear answer. Now, there are some key benefits to actually using this verbal approach in these early days of this new concept acquisition. And the first thing is, if we think about using questioning and discussion in our classrooms, it's a prime opportunity to build in some scaffolding to then support the students in developing this thinking. We can give them that nice, easy entry-level opener, and then we can build upon it with slightly more challenging questions or challenging bits to add into their discussion. And that's going to help them get this much larger picture in their heads. As you probably know from doing this yourselves as teachers, then when you've got to verbalise your thoughts, then it's actually something that's quite tricky to do initially. And when you're actually thinking about how to get a point across, saying it out loud is actually quite useful. And what we find is that through students actually having to verbalise their thoughts, to think about how to explain what's running through their little minds, then it can help them to clarify what it is they're trying to say. And that is then going to make those written tasks easier later on. Third one is obviously if you're doing questioning, if you're doing discussions, the paired work that you're wandering around listening in on, then when those misconceptions come up, if they say something that is a blatant misconception, we can identify it and we can take those steps immediately to rectify it. It's not a case of having to wait until we go through the marking process, because that could obviously be quite a way down the line. So that rapid identification of misconceptions and the even quicker addressing of them is obviously a benefit to us. One of the concepts we've looked at previously is the idea of repetition for those key things that we want to really drill into those students. So during this verbal activity, what we can actually do is get them to do the same concept over and over again. Different questions, different students involved. We can get them repeating those bits of information we desperately want them to take away. And when they're giving us these answers, when they are talking, we can listen to the language they're using. They're not always using the best language. Quite often you're going to find bits of slang dropping in, you're going to find some quite lazy terms, they're not necessarily using the right subject-specific terms, and this gives us an opportunity to really reinforce that formal academic language, to make sure that we are upgrading the very basic language that they try to default to better quality language. We're trying to broaden those horizons for them and also really drill in that academic language for our own subjects that they've got to be able to utilise and understand on those exams. It's making that the norm in our lessons. The way that we're going to do this in our lessons then is by not accepting these incomplete answers. We all know that when it comes to actual success on formal examinations, the way they secure the best marks on those papers is through using the correct formal academic language. Whether that be the basic English side of things or whether that's a subject-specific language, it's got to be good quality. And all too often, from marking exam papers for many years, I know that the type of language that a lot of students use is very basic. They're trying to explain a concept without using the right terminology. And immediately that's going to cost them marks. So what we need to do in our lessons when they're giving us these slightly incomplete answers, the ones that have got that lower level language, it's not really that good, is push them. Because if we don't, if we just accept those little part answers that they're giving us, then they're going to take that as, that's all right, that's the type of answer you can give. And they will think that they can get away with giving that exact same answer when they write it on that exam. And they can't. So how do we do this? When they give us an answer and we're thinking about the language that they're using, if it is very basic entry-level English, challenge them. Ask them to upgrade one of those words. Say, okay, so you've given me this word, how could we make it better? What's an alternative word we could use that means that same thing? Because that means all of us across the school then doing that key part of our role, and we're supporting that English language development. Because as much as people do like to think the English teachers are the experts in English, and they absolutely are, they are not the only ones who are teaching it in a school. We know that. So everyone can then help support that language development by challenging them, get them to think of that different word to utilise there. And when it comes to your subject-specific terminology, if they're just giving a vague description of something, don't accept it. Say, okay, but what term is it? What's that process called? What phrase should we use for this? What is this particular thing called in your particular subject-specific context? Don't accept the lazy answers, the very low-grade answers. Push them for more. And if we all do that, day in, day out, eventually their language skills will improve. Their understanding of this formal academic vocabulary is going to improve. And therefore their answers on the exams will improve, and so will their grades.